So I've been getting a lot of messages and just questions asking about my health story and my health journey in particular. While I don't think it's super important for you to know everything about my journey to heal, I also find a lot of value in listening to other people's journeys. There's lots of podcasts and books and stories I've listened to from other people, and it is nice to be like, oh, like, that's exactly what happened to me. Oh, that's exactly my story. Not only does it help with like the isolation, which is a huge part of chronic illness, it also just gives you some belief in, kind of that if they healed, I can heal, because my symptoms and their symptoms were so similar, or even so different in some ways, but also there was a lot of crossover. Whatever it is, I think there's some value in having my story out there. So the only part of the reason I don't do it is this video could very easily be at least an hour, even a couple of hours. And I know it's okay for me to miss some parts and to come back and talk about it later, or to just let them not be part of this exact video. But there's so much of like, oh, I missed that, and that's so crucial, and I want everyone to know about that one thing. Yeah, sitting in my car again. Hair's a little wet. The reason I'm in my car is because I have 2 little kids, and I drive to a parking lot because I have 5 minutes. Anyway, so I'm gonna try to give it my whole go here. So this is my story of chronic pain and chronic illness, and the thing I most identify with is, I guess, chronic fatigue syndrome. But my belief is that chronic fatigue syndrome is just your nervous system has basically given up, and that's the way that your body has chose to manifest your chronic pain and illness. For someone else, it could be pelvic pain, back pain, and all those things are happening for a lot of us with chronic fatigue syndrome. But chronic fatigue syndrome is kind of special. It's not just like, oh, my back really hurt and I could never get out of bed. We have that, and we have depression and anxiety and brain fog, but what we really have is this crippling fatigue and this inability to have our brains function. And there's nothing quite like it, because I've had lots of chronic pain, and I've had insomnia, and I've had gut issues, and there's nothing quite like that fatigue, because you can't function. It takes everything from you. Even if you can get out of bed, your life is so diminished. Anyway, so for me, I didn't have that fatigue right away. So I'll start from the very beginning with my first chronic pain symptom. So at 20 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night with horrible abdominal pain and gas and a couple other things happening, and I did not know what was going on. I had just started birth control. I thought maybe I had a urinary tract infection, or that had gone to my kidneys maybe, and I literally thought I was dying. I had to have my dad drive me to the emergency room. Super embarrassing. Had to have all these ultrasounds and x-rays and stuff, and the doctor literally came back and put my x-ray on his little light mirror and was like, "You're full of shit." And that's literally what it was. I had a bowel obstruction, and it was so painful. And from that day forward, my digestion never worked. But I was 20, and I kept drinking alcohol, and I went to UC Santa Barbara and partied and whatever. Just kept living my life kind of, but diminished. Couldn't really keep up with my peers the same. Anytime I drank alcohol, I got sick and usually would throw up, or just couldn't recover. I'd spend the rest of the weekend just feeling horrible. And it just started. So what I started to do, the way it affected my life then was, I took fiber pills. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 20 and I could still survive. I was still functioning. My life was still happening. So that was 20 years old. I still transferred and went to UC Santa Barbara and got a double major, and kept trying to exercise and was always struggling with weight. So I could tell you about my specific symptoms, but now in hindsight, I have so much more information to give you, and I'm going to give it to you in here. So now that I look back on that time, I was in a binge restrict state starting from then. Basically, it was 5 days a week, try to eat healthy, exercise, and the weekend would come and it was drink too much and kind of crash, and then started all over again. And a ton of I didn't even realize it. I didn't struggle in my teens with any body stuff or eating disorders, but in my early 20s, it started to brew. I really thought that I was going to get taller and thinner and I could change the way my body looked. And when that wasn't happening and I was starting to be an adult woman, I was no longer a kid, I think I started to panic, and I thought, well, I have to, restrict, and really a lot of body stuff came in with that. And so, fast forward a few years later of just just really the gut stuff, really just, and it was just, I was always constipated and I needed help. Metamucil fiber, and those things didn't really help, but I didn't know that, it was a little bit of relief, but it wasn't what I really needed to be doing. And I just wasn't aware of the dietary changes and the other things I could do. And I wasn't really aware that IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which I hadn't gotten that diagnosis at that point. I'd just gone and had an obstruction and didn't know, just kind of lived with the pain. I lived with the symptom because it wasn't super painful then. It was just like, something that I had to deal with. Always kind of dealing with constipation. And yeah, where am I? Sorry. This is what the problem with being a mom and recovering from chronic fatigue is sometimes you lose your track. So anyways, I had that for a few years. I graduate college. I moved to Italy. And at first, I remember when I graduated college, I spent the entire summer in my house on a super strict, chicken, avocado, rice, exercising at home, didn't hang out with any friends because I really didn't want to smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or do anything. I wanted to be so healthy and clean. I really wanted that for my life. And I didn't know why I kept going back to those things. And I so badly just wanted to be thin and healthy and look athletic because I love sports and I was an athlete. I was doing sports, but I didn't look that way. I still don't look that way. And I now that I'm 35, I understand that I will never maybe look that way, and I'm just doing the best I can with what I got, and I'm trying to love what I've got. Meaning my body that God gave me, if you believe in God. So I'm living in Italy. When I first got there, I look back on that with a lot of kind of almost sadness for myself. I got to Italy. I was a block away from the Coliseum. I didn't even go see it for a few weeks. I was just so focused. I got there. I needed to get a gym. And every morning, I was an au pair. I watched these little girls, and then I'd go to the gym and I exercised. And then the host family thing started to get tense. And all of a sudden I started having all these symptoms, like exhaustion and inability to exercise. And something crazy happened. I started binge eating, and I remember, so this is a very Italian moment. The mom would always make the little girls some pasta, and again, hindsight's 2020. The mom was anorexic, and I didn't quite understand that, and she was restricting the food in the house, and so I didn't get paid anything, but I got room and board, but there was no food and I had no money. So I was so desperate to eat, and I was over exercising that I wasn't eating enough for me. Let's say this lady's eating 800 calories a day and I need 2,800 calories. It wasn't happening. I spent the few pennies I had on food until it ran out. And so then I was kind of panicked. And I remember one night the mom threw the little girl's pasta, her pasta, in the garbage. And most nights the parents would go out. They were kind of socialites. They'd go to the theater or whatever. And I went in the garbage and I ate that pasta, and that was the first time I binge ate. And that would be, God, at least probably if I was 23, I binge ate until I was about 29, 30. I struggled with that. So pretty badly for several of those years in the middle there. Not so much at the beginning and not so much at the end. But anyway, so I started binge eating in Italy, and that was kind of started to gain the weight back, started to not be able to exercise or recover from exercise, all things that I would later understand to be the beginnings of chronic fatigue. But I was still functioning in a way that when I would have my major crash later on, I would not be able to function. I could still work and exercise and party and kind of get by. And it was just harder, and again, not keeping up with my peers. And there's this level of panic in my life and fear, and never just feeling quite okay. And I think, again, 2020, looking back, I was so badly looking for the approval of that family in Italy. I was so badly looking for the approval of society in general. I wanted to be seen as thin and gorgeous and someone worth admiration. Those are the things I thought were worth admiration. So that's what I focused on, was, having the right degrees and getting the right jobs and looking the right way and all that stuff. And there were so many people, even back in the States, I was looking to impress with my life. And so eventually Italy blew up for me. I tried to change families. It got worse. I tried a raw vegan diet when I was in Italy for a little bit, very briefly. And so I thought, I just need to go back to America. So I did. I left Italy in kind of a crash and burn, hugely embarrassed, so much shame. But I was desperate. I ended up back in my parents' house and became obsessed with food and controlling my food and eating healthy. And at the beginning, I remember I went and bought a juicer, went to Costco, bought all the organic produce I could. I remember I had a whole assembly line in my parents' backyard with thousands of carrots and celery, and making myself all these juices that I could, huge canisters of juices, and that's all I was going to eat for months. and I didn't lose any weight, and my digestion didn't get better. I actually was getting fatter, and it was so, and like my skin was bad and my energy was low and sluggish, and I was so worried. And you know, after a couple months of that, I was really become obsessed with like finding a job, and I kept trying and things weren't happening. And then all at once I got like 3 jobs at once. And I liked all of them. When I turned down one, I was working part-time, and then once I got the other one, I had to make a choice. So I let the one go, and this job was given to me by the people that I wanted to impress more than anything in the world. They were close family friends that I had. Let's say I was their babysitter. And I was, but they were more than that to me. I might have only been that to them, and God bless them for giving me the opportunities that they did. I think I would have just been a kid on the couch watching TV, maybe not even gone to college or anything. And they really opened my life up for me and treated me very well, and are just a beautiful family. But the issue with that was I had no boundaries. So like I wasn't, again, I'm giving you all like the background, like the trauma and the emotional stuff that ends up leading to these symptoms, because it's important. And I think a lot of people actually don't even realize that's happening. And I'm so highly aware of it after over a fucking decade of doing the work and journaling and understanding it, and just kind of being an empathetic, attuned person, which a lot of us probably are that suffer with chronic illness. I think if you're not very empathetic and unaware, you can probably get away without all this pain in your life. So anyway, these people were hugely important to me. It was their company, and kind of as a Hail Mary, they gave me a position at the company. But that position had a timeline because the company was moving from where I lived to Southern California. So anyway, I started to love the job, and I kind of pushed for me to get that position down in Southern California. And that was going to happen. And I went vegan again, and it worked this time. And I started over exercising. Again, I don't know if you need the specifics, but basically I remember exactly what happened. Probably like 4 or 5 days after I got the job, I'm scrolling through Facebook, because this is 2014. So Facebook's still happening, people. Okay, I'm not that old. Maybe it was it was 2014. And I wish I could remember who had posted it, but it was just a picture of Rich Roll. If you know who that is, he's a huge famous podcaster, ultra marathon runner, but mainly his podcast, what he's known for now. But at the time he had a book, and it was just a picture of him running, and he was just like vascular and skinny and like gorgeous, and it was like what I wanted my body to look like, which is another thing I'll say as a woman. I always kind of venerated men and wanted to be like a man, and I ended up trying to eat and follow their kind of exercise routines, which just led me to a very bad place. If you're a woman, maybe turn off the male gurus, and they're not serving you. I would say there's almost their life and their bodies are so different than yours. Anyway, that's tangential. I'll get back to where I was going. So anyway, I got this job. I'm so looking for the approval of these people, and I started to feel like I was getting it. They were, I'm doing really good in the job. I'm losing all this weight. And what was really crazy was I went vegan, which, I have my thoughts on that. It worked for me very briefly. But I became a zealot, because here I went from like about 4 or 5 years of like digestive issues and fat and all these issues to like digestion was on point. My like serotonin was pumping, endorphins were going, probably because I was running for like 3 hours a day and riding my bike and swimming. And also I think part of the reason that I had like a really big like relief and cessation of symptoms was because I wasn't eating horribly, but all of a sudden I had no gluten, no sugar, no dairy, no meat, no inflammatory foods, and I was so clean. And I remember like a few days into it, like getting on a treadmill and running 7 miles. I had never ran more than a 5K, which is only 3 miles if you're in Europe or something and don't know. I don't know how many kilometers 7 miles is, but anyway, it was crazy for me to be able to do that. And at the end, I was getting off work and running 19 miles for fun within a few months. So that was a crazy trajectory. And then I made a mistake at work. I was very stressed about it. And a few weeks later, maybe a week, it was Christmas break. We'd come back from Christmas break. I wake up to a really flippant email saying, "Hey, me and my wife talked in bed and you're not getting the promotion." For me, now looking back on that, I know how I felt when I got it, and I was devastated, but I don't think I connected it to the crash immediately that was coming very quickly with days after. But yeah, that hurt so badly, because I think, so when I started the job, these were close family friends, but they were kind of like ignoring me. Like I was at the job, but like they would come into the office and not talk to me, and I would be like, okay, like trying to be really professional and not push it on them, and like, but like so wanting everything I could get. And so to get this like really kind of personal like moment of like me and my wife talked in bed, like, huh? Like I would have been better just like, hey, I've decided that it'd be best for the company if you didn't move down. Like that would have hurt less. But this like that they personally were like in bed talking, like just like it killed me, it crushed me. And I remember like that was like a Friday, let's say, and that weekend I just kind of like was in a funk, and I got sick a Monday morning, let's say, and it was like a cold maybe, and then my body stopped digesting food. And then I kind of like the cold kind of ended, but I was feeling like shit. So then I tried to, get back in the pool. I remember at that point, towards, just before that email came in, I had clocked in a time that was considered like a professional triathlete's time in the pool, because I was trying to train for a certain race that you needed to qualify for. And you had to do, let's say, like 2,500 meters in under 28 minutes. And I had done it. And for someone who didn't grow up swimming or anything, and within 2 months to hit that, it was, I was pushing it. And you can't see me, but I'm short, I'm kind of chubby. And for me to do that was, wow, like I was killing it. And that was my dream, was I was going to move to LA, get this promotion, become like a vegan triathlete. Anyway, didn't happen. Let's put it that way. But so I got that email, and I get my little cold, and my symptoms start coming, and I go to get in the pool, and I can't even swim back and forth. That was all I could do. I went back, and I just had to get back to where I started, and I was done. I went and sat in the hot tub, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Waited a couple days, got on the bike. I used to bike, like 50 miles. It took me like 3.5 hours or something. And I would live in a place with a really flat bike trail, so no incline, but still it was, good time. But I remember I was training for ultras, so I wasn't looking for speed. I was looking for, endurance. So I'm trying to do like 200 miles eventually, instead of like quickly doing 20 miles fast. Anyway, so that was what I was trying to do. And then all of a sudden I couldn't do any of it. And then guess what happened? I was exhausted. I couldn't do anything. So not only, the malaise, I couldn't recover from exercise at all. And that was just panic, because then the weight started to come back on, and I started to binge eat. And the worst thing that would happen was, so at first, these first few years of the disease, I had hypersomnia. So I would sleep. I would get off work and I would just lay in my bed. I remember exactly what I do. I'd like turn my laptop so I could watch YouTube. At the time, Casey Neistat and daily vloggers were a big deal. So I'd watch them. And then I would just lay in my bed the whole day. And then I would try to eat something. And then I would sleep for like 12 hours and wake up completely unrefreshed. Like I feel like I had died. Like it was like I'd been hit by a train and hadn't slept in weeks. And then I'd have to pull myself out of bed. I could no longer wake up and make my big green smoothie. I would just barely get to work. And I would fall asleep at my desk. And then if someone brought in food, I'd go hide it and binge eat it, because I was known as a vegan in the office. So for me to go take a cinnamon roll and hide it and eat it, so embarrassing. And just devastating for me, like my soul. Like I knew what I was doing and it wasn't what I wanted. Fast forward like a couple months of this going on, I'm just in complete turmoil, don't know what to do. And then they say that the job is open for me now, another job at their office in Southern California, and I can go. At this point, I was aware that if that email devastated me that much, I probably shouldn't put myself in the line of fire with people that could have that much effect on me, unknowingly and without any malicious intent. It was just that they were able to affect me, and still do, so much. It's wild. So I quit the job and met up with a friend that I had known in Italy, and we worked our way up the west coast of the United States on organic farms. And it was a mess. I was pretending to be vegan but binge eating. I was my heaviest weight during this time. I had to go to Goodwill and buy some like stretchy pants and like some men's Hawaiian shirts to fit me. It was really bad. But yeah, it was the binge eating. That was just like, it was. And then I kept trying to exercise. I remember one of the other people working on the organic farms with us was like a professional runner. And like, so I wanted to do that, right? So I started to like get up and run like 3 miles, and I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing. I needed to just give my little body a hug and say it was okay. I did skip some things. So during all of that stuff going on and all the turmoil and whatnot, when I was back at home working the job, there was issues within my family. Let's just put it that way. My parents were close to getting separated. There was maybe alcoholism and adultery. And my brothers, I have 2 lovely brothers, but they were both gone during their own thing. So this family unit I'd grown up with that was like really solid, nuclear family. Parents always stayed together, all three of our, siblings close in age with the same parents, and just solid, like not a lot of known dysfunction. Now, of course, hindsight, realize there were some issues, but when that all happened, just felt like everything broke away. College is over, don't know what to do with my life. Italy didn't work. The family in Italy didn't work. The family I was so wanting the approval of that got me the job didn't work. My own family was falling apart. Finances were now stressful. Healthcare was now stressful. And I'm on these farms, binge eating, and just like completely not sure what to do with my life. And at the last farm, wasn't supposed to be the last farm, but it ended up being, I just broke out in hives. My body broke out in hives and I couldn't work and I was just struggling. And the people were like, hey, if you can't work, then you got to go. Like, this is a room and board for work situation. So got in my car in Oregon, drove back down to where I'm from in California. And, I don't know if all this matters, but ended up getting a job at a gym that was directly next door to the office job I had just quit, which is pretty embarrassing. I'm making $10 an hour folding towels, and I could only do 2 4-hour shifts a week, and that pushed me. Just that pushed me. I remember I'd have to do everything I could to wake up and get myself ready, and I was so overweight and so embarrassed to be standing at this front desk of this, not a gym, it was a racket, tennis fancy kind of place with athletic people coming in. The local university's tennis team is there and all the fitness trainers. Anyway, and some of my ex-coworkers are coming in and seeing me folding towels for $10 an hour behind a desk when I was supposed to leave and do all these great things. So anyway, that was a tough time, and it wasn't good. And I was like, what am I going to do? I decided I was going to become a teacher. I thought maybe I've always, during my whole health journey, this was a huge part of it, was a job is going to fix me because it's going to give me I was really aware that I think humans need meaning and purpose, and that was going to help my symptoms, and that my symptoms were so bad because I had the wrong meanings and purpose, because I really did kind of understand, even though I thought that my solution for all the physical issues was going to be a physical solution. I also did understand that it's really important to the way you're living your life in your mind and body. I didn't have the words for it then. I don't even have them now, I guess. But I understood that in the sense that I knew that I had put all my value into getting the approval of these people, and that I had changed who I was to please them. And they didn't care about me at all. They really didn't. Not in a malicious way again, but they just didn't even care at all, which is almost worse. It'd been better if they hated me. They just didn't care. And I knew that was a terrible thing to have done, and that I kind of had gone down a wrong path for myself. So I was really committed to finding the right path and this sole purpose. And I thought teaching was going to be it. And when I went to go do that, and then there was a huge issue within my family, and I was unable to live at home anymore. And just, Hail Mary again. There was a farm, an organic farm that a friend worked at, and that I could maybe go and live in a yurt on this farm and get a position. And that's what I did. And I thought that was going to heal me. I really thought getting away from the EMFs and the lights and living in the city and just being out in nature. And I finally was going to eat vegan and not cheat and binge and all this stuff. And I was just going to be on a farm. It was going to be beautiful. Woof. Little did I know that. And when I went to the farm, I went to work for a nonprofit on the farm in the education thing, and it would have been pretty chill. But unfortunately, because I have a fancy resume on paper, I got there and the owner was like, you're working for our farm. You have professional skills, you have a college degree, we need a position filled, you want to stay here, you're doing this. So I ended up being their greenhouse manager and doing their organic certification and running some of their farmers markets, which I was in way over my head. I'm a history major. I know nothing about farming, except for those few months that I worked on organic farms for free, which was, I was picking strawberries, and one of them I did woodwork, construction, built a deck. I had nothing to do with farming. Anyway, here I am finding myself in way over my head, which would be the story of my life for about a decade. I'd go to get these really easy jobs and end up way over my head, partly because of my own people pleasing and wanting to be approved. So I'd overstate my skills, and kind of I know how to come off like I know what I'm talking about, but the truth was I wasn't able to handle those jobs. So that was my first real experience with that, was on this farm. And little did I know that an agricultural work week is 6 days a week, 10 days a week, so 60 hours. That's the required work week. That's what's normal. I was at the point where I probably should have been not working at all. So this was killing me. I was able to talk to the owner, and we basically got me into just doing the bare minimum. less than 30 hours a week, probably. Honestly, less than that, but that was honestly, it was pushing me. Every time I had to do anything like a farmer's market, I was crushed. Farmer's market days, I don't need to go into the details, but it's like 10 hours of labor, like intense, heavy labor that you can imagine. Loading up a truck, driving it, setting up your booth, selling all day, breaking it all down, putting it all back in the truck, driving 2 hours back, putting it all back in the cooler, unloading the whole truck. Crazy. It's crazy. The amount of work. And again, I was probably at breakdown from that. I was probably making $8 an hour. Total joke, but wasting my time really. But anyway, I learned, and I met my husband that when I was on that farm, like 2 months after I got there, I met my husband, my now husband. And what a great thing, because at that time I thought I was going to be sick for a few months, not a decade or more. So I approached it differently than I maybe should have, but good for me, because it worked out. So pretty quickly though, once I met him, he didn't match with the lifestyle of the farm. So I had to, after I spent about a year on that farm figuring it out, and then we moved in together and got out of the farm, but we were both really poor, and we ended up in a moldy, rat-infested little metal trailer at the beach, which was cute, but it was $900 a month, which I don't know if you know California and Santa Cruz area specifically, but basically a bedroom is usually $1,500 in someone's room. So to have our own little place for $900 was crazy. But there was a reason it cost $900. It was literally like a weekend camping trailer that you'd put on the back of your car. And we lived in that for a couple of years, and it was full of mold. I had strep throat 10 times in the year and a half we lived there, from the week we moved in to the week we moved out. I had it 10 times. I've never had it before in my life, and I've never had it again. So anyways, I know it was because of that. I took over 10 rounds of penicillin, and then some of Cipro and erythromycin. I was on so many antibiotics, completely ruined my guts. My symptoms were horrible. And so, okay, I went fast forward a little bit, but that was during the whole year and a half that we were there. The first month we moved in, I didn't have a job. And I remember I had strep throat right away, but for some reason I felt great because I was living with this guy. I felt like I had purpose. He'd come home, I'd make him lunch. I had no stress. It was great. And then the job that, I had signed up to get when I quit the farm started, which was managing a gym, a tennis racket, fancy club. And part of this gym, it had a big kitchen, was that when the tennis players were done, they would get like catered lunches. And part of my job as the manager was when the kitchen staff was gone on the weekends, I would put out the food. And whatever they didn't get to eat, I'd have to clean it up. Guess what? I binge ate it. Disgusting, gross, but I did. I'd go eat all this food. I'd go into the kitchen. I'd steal the food. I hated myself for it. And that lasted only for 6 months because I quit, and I was thinking I would start teaching finally. I tried substitute teaching. That didn't work. Anyways, I feel like I'm just droning on. Maybe somebody's listening to this. Maybe somebody cares. I don't know, if it's... No, my hair's falling down. I don't know if it's that helpful to know all the specifics of my exact story. And I feel like maybe I'm giving way too much detail. Like, you don't need to know where I lived and all that. But maybe it's helping. And it's hard to always remember to give you guys this is where I was, what I was doing for work, but this was also what was going on emotionally, and this was what the symptoms were that are all in line with that. So it's a lot to talk about and a lot for you to digest probably. I think it was at that point though, not long after that basically, that I started to, so again, I did skip something. When I got to the farm, I went on government insurance. I was making so little money that I was able to go on government insurance. I just turned 26 and aged out of being able to be covered by my parents. That's how it works in the United States, I think. That's how it worked for me. And so I'm on government medical insurance, which was actually amazing. Gets a lot of flack. I saw every specialist at Stanford, everywhere you could imagine, thousands. I had 7 doctor's appointments a week. So I had therapists, I had physical therapists, I had colonoscopies, GI specialists. What do you call that? What is it called? Oh, I can't think of it now. It was an ear, nose, and throat guy because I kept getting the strep. Infectious disease doctor, that's what it was. I saw 2 of them. Probably 10 GI guys. I got sleep studies. I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, given a CPAP machine, hot mess, sleeping with that in my little trailer. Thank bless my now husband for putting up with that. Anyway, so that's what my job was. I was trying to just make the farm work, and I was going to 7 doctor's appointments a week, sometimes 2 or 3 a day, some of them an hour away. And then, the gym happened. I was still going. I'd kind of given up though, after a year and a half of doctors and stuff, kind of gave up on Western medicine because it was the same thing. It was just antidepressant, or some special medication for maybe you have autoimmune or thyroid, or it was just medication. They had no other options, and I was really anti-pharma. Again, I did skip something else. When I first got my symptoms way back when I was working the job and got the email that sent me into my crash, I did go to my family doctor right then, and he diagnosed me with irritable bowel immediately and gave me a medication. This is actually an important part, because I went to him, I said, hey, my main symptoms are fatigue and constipation. Sorry, I said that funny. Fatigue and constipation. That's what I said. He said, okay, here's this medication. Go to the pharmacy. Waiting at the pharmacy. Pharmacist says, it's ready. You want a consult? Okay, here's this medication. Main side effects are fatigue and constipation. I was like, dude, those are my main symptoms. He's like, I don't know. And then take it. I didn't take it right away. Like months later, I tried it immediately, which would happen to me several times over the next decade. I would like get really desperate. I'd take whatever SSRI or whatever medication I had been prescribed for no more than ever, probably a few weeks. Immediately my constipation was worse. Immediately my fatigue was worse. Immediately my insomnia was worse. Everything was terrible. Like, hated it. So medication does not work for me. I do think it's totally okay to take it. Not forever. I think that that's a problem. But I think if you're as depressed as I was and as much pain as I was, if it helps you get past that, hell yeah, take some medication. I wish I could have gone back to 25-year-old Gina and said, hey, like, this might help you just get past this slump, to get out of like not being able to even help yourself. And maybe there was a medication that could have done that for me. So again, fast forward, I'm at the gym. I quit. I think I'm going to teach. I try substitute teaching, hate it. When I was working at the gym, some guy came in with some samples for some really cool beverage that had like magnesium and all this cool stuff. And I was like, whoa, like I take all that to like be healthy. And they were local. And I looked it up and it ended up being like a really cool startup. I ended up working there. It's extremely stressful, low paying. If you stay in Santa Cruz and work any job, you're not making a lot of money. You got to drive over to the Silicon Valley, which is really close, and you make like 5 times as much. But I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, kept trying to do that. I was so sick. I used to ride my bike 10 miles each way to get there because the traffic was so bad. And then I'm pushing and I'm super stressed at this job. Anyways, I can't talk about what ended up happening there, but it wasn't good. And I left that job and I was done. I thought I was done. I really wanted to just be done and move back home and have my boyfriend come with me. And I was over it. But his best friend worked at a local elementary school and they got me a job there. This was the easiest job with more than double the pay I was making before. I was dying. I hated it. I would like go and fall asleep in my car. I was hiding at lunch breaks. I was always hungry. I was so tired. It was like half the hours and I still couldn't do it. I would literally drag myself to the job. If there were substitute teachers who didn't know to expect me, because I was a full-time, but I wasn't a classroom teacher. I was a specialist. So I'd go into each grade's room during their reading and writing and assist kids that were falling behind. Anyway, so basically I was able to hide kind of. So like if the teacher was gone on a field trip or, whatever, I would like go fall asleep in the bathroom or like go to my car and fall asleep or go down to the store and buy food and eat it. 'Cause I was still just overeating, constantly. Anyway. And then I'd get off work and I'd go sit in the sauna in the hot tub just to like help my brain like kind of wake up, and then go home and just kind of lay there and do it all over again. Finally, after that was some of my lowest health points. Like my hypersomnia was so bad I could sleep like 20 hours a day and it still didn't feel good. I had no life. I was so depressed. I was so embarrassed. My life was just shrinking down to literally fit on the head of a pin. Like it was just so tiny at this point. I would say my life, honestly, it sounds dramatic because I was still working a job and everything and could do things, but really my life was only about 10%. If I think about being able to do 10% of the exercise I could do before, probably not even 10%, 10% of the social interactions, 10% of the joy, 10% of the creativity, the fun, the relationships. I didn't even have 10%, honestly. I had like 5%. So yeah, I was done, and I decided that I was going to stop pushing. I was going to move back home finally and just live a really small life. I was going to work at a grocery store and just be very relaxed. So I quit my job. We went to move back, and my husband's grandfather died. So instead of moving back with my family, we moved everything there. But like that month, his grandfather died, and he ended up staying with his grandmother and helping her. And we decided to move in with her instead. And she lived right in the heart of the Silicon Valley, like right next to Apple. And the opportunities there were crazy. Like I could go from making $25,000, $30,000 a year to like $110,000. So at first I didn't do that. At first I got a minimum wage job at a local grocery store, and I couldn't stop binge eating. And I also was in so much pain. I would come home and put my feet in like hot Epsom salt baths and like massage them, but I was just in so much pain. And then the binge eating, it was just, I wasn't happy. And I'm like, why am I here making $15 an hour in the Silicon Valley when like the average rate of pay is like $50 an hour? So I went and I got a very big job making multiple six figures, which for me was huge. I'd literally I had tax returns that were like $12,000. That's why I was on government insurance. So to go from that to that was crazy. And at first it was exciting, and I thought that was going to work for me. Again, I think I'm telling you guys all about this because if you're watching my channel, if you're listening, my healing journey is strictly related to Nicole Sachs and mind-body approach and somatic healing and healing trauma and healing people-pleasing and healing goodest behavior and finding what you're, just chilling, not living in fear, living in love. Sounds super woo-woo, hadoo-doo. I would probably, I wish I could show this video to myself 10 years ago. I'd probably think I was insane. I just wasn't there. I really wasn't there. I was not into anything alternative at all, really. I mean, maybe a little bit. I tried to be vegan, but not really. I was still, you gotta go through the pain to get there, I guess. So yeah, I went and got this huge job, and immediately bad things started to happen. So I'd had hypersomnia. I started to be sick when I was 20, which would have been 2010. And then that was my blockage in my intestines. And then when I was 25 is when I got the email. That would have been 2015. And now this is middle or end of 2018. I get this big job. And pretty quickly at the end of 2018, I started to have insomnia. Just a few months after getting it. And before that, so for the first 4 years from 2015 to 18, I had horrible hypersomnia. So like I said, I could sleep for like 20 hours a day, which good God bring me back to that. It's so much better than insomnia. Even though you feel like you're wasting your life away, there's nothing worse than wasting your life away in pain, awake, staring at the wall, wishing you were sleeping. So that's where it was. I couldn't sleep. I was so stressed. Again, I think a lot of the binge eating was probably still happening. And I haven't talked about this, but I started to go, when I first left that office job and moved to the farm, then I left the gym job and I went to that farm and lived in that yurt. Pretty quickly after, I decided to go to Overeaters Anonymous to face my binge eating and work through that 12-step program. And I was in that for like 4 years until COVID. Once COVID hit, I stopped going to meetings, and I also stopped binge eating, so that was nice. But I still believe in it all, and that's great. And if I ever needed it as a resource to go back to, I think Nicole's work is the same kind of thing in a much easier approach, and it actually covers everything. I actually believe that Nicole's work, and really just the mind-body approach, kind of covers everything. If you've got eating disorders, OCD, ADHD, whatever, it kind of, ADHD I don't think there's a cure for per se, but it helps all of it. Anyway, where was I? So yeah, I'm at that job, that big job, and I'm binge eating again, and I have the insomnia as my new main symptom, and sciatica started, and then back pain. Unfortunately, that back pain, here I am talking to you 6 years later, that mother trucker is still there, and she is there with a vengeance, a fiery, passionate vengeance. I've tried everything. It's not going away yet, but I believe that that's one of my last symptoms to go. I had so the sciatica went. The insomnia has hugely gone compared to where I was for 5-6 years. It was so bad, especially, anyway, there were several years of my insomnia where I didn't sleep. I would sleep for a few hours a night, but I would wake up usually for 6 or 7 hours a night. That's a big insomnia. That's what I call them. So 2 hours is kind of like where it started, and by the end it was 6 or 7 hours a night. So I'd wake up at like midnight and not go back to sleep till like 7 a.m. And then it's pretty hard to keep a job because anyway, I'll get to what my last job was, which the last job I ever had before I had kids was working at 2 in the afternoon, because that's as quickly as I could get, because I would sleep from like 7 to 11, and then it would take me like 3 hours just to wake myself up with a hot bath and get to the job for that I only worked for 3 hours. But I'm jumping far ahead. So I'm working that huge job, and it ends not well. Not really because of me this time. They weren't good people, so that was unfortunate that I ended up. And that's why I was so stressed. It was golden handcuffs. The money was such a big deal for someone who had so much fear and insecurity around money. To leave that was just, I couldn't. Sorry, I accidentally made that video stop, so there'll be a little cut, unless I figure out how to string them together. So where was I? Yeah, so I left that job. It ended anyway. And my binge eating peaked like crazy, and I went to a meeting for 12-step for OA every day for a couple weeks. And then unfortunately, I had a few months where I kind of went back into focusing on diet and not working, and that was a really tough time. And then I ended up having a family member open a restaurant and decided and he begged me for help, so I went and helped him. Pretty stressful time. Wasn't a good fit for me. If this family member's watching, you're a very stressful person. You need to chill the fuck out. Anyway, but COVID hit like 2 months after we officially rebranded and opened the restaurant, which is so crazy. So we had to close the restaurant. I was so relieved. Oh, it was like the first time in so long it felt like that I didn't have to pretend that I needed to have a job. It was okay to be unemployed. It was okay to stay home. Like it was the life I needed to live, the quiet life at home, just dealing with chronic pain or whatever. And like everyone else had to do it too. So like I actually felt like less isolated and alone. So interesting. Everyone else is freaking out, and I'm like, this is great. COVID's great, y'all. Like, let's let this be the new status quo for the world. Now I understand that COVID and the lockdowns did a lot of not great things for our economy, etc., and people's mindsets. But for me at the time, it was good. Maybe I have a issue with drinking too much. I feel like I'm drinking a lot of water here. But when people talk, they drink a lot. So, like you ever see people on radio shows or whatever, makes sense. You get a dry mouth. Okay, here we are now, 2020, COVID. I'm trying to even remember what happened. There I was, relieved. And it's so funny to like look back at and talk about this, because that was like March. By June, I had a new job. Which, why didn't I give myself a little more time? But because basically when you're unemployed, it's cool for like a few weeks. After that, you're like, yeah, I need something to do, which is what I kept doing. I kept thinking like, I'm going to quit this job and I'm just going to spend like 6 months healing. But after like 2 weeks, I'd be like, I'm not feeling any better. I better just go get a job. That'll make me feel better. So I kept doing that. Here we are, the 6 years of that, even more maybe. But 2020, I get a job as like a personal assistant to like this big real estate guy who was super stressed because he owned all this commercial real estate that all the tech companies were in that were now working remotely, and he wasn't getting his money and he was going crazy. And that also ended up being a super stressful job. I started as his personal assistant, and then he wanted me to work for his company. Of course, I was so excited and said yes. Way too stressful. Couldn't handle it. End up quitting. End up leaving in a blaze of dust and glory and embarrassment, and there I am again. I'm trying to think when that would have been. That would have been like, let's say January of 2021, and I did take a few hard, solid months off then, and I didn't start working again until March. I guess that wasn't that long. March of 2021. And I started working like a really little tiny babysitting job. It was like 3 hours a day at the beginning. It was from 2 to 5. And like, that was so much for me. I was so bad at this point. My insomnia was I had pain all over my body. I think I talked about this in the last video, but I'd have to like do so many things every evening of like fiery, steamy hot bath, Epsom salt baths, completely like going to the sauna in the hot tub, stretching and like massaging my entire body, then foam rolling, then like rubbing my body in like anti-inflammatory CBD lotion, and then taking all these like, chamomile and sleep and valerian root droppers and just trying and putting my legs up in the air. I did everything, meditate, breath work, sound machine, no blue light in the eyes. Like, it was, anyway. If you're listening to this and you're obsessed with every little thing too, it's all part of TMS. It's all part of what we've got going on, is, you know, just focusing and trying to control the whole environment and everything. I think I'm talking too much. I'm kind of losing my brain power, but I am close to the end of my main story, I guess, so bear with me a little more. So yeah, I was just struggling so much at this little job, could barely do it. I had just gotten married and we had just moved into our own little apartment. We had lived with his grandmother for the few years before that to save some money, but we were married now, and I was kind of embarrassed to still be living there, and she had a caretaker and didn't really need us anymore, so it was time to go. And we're at this little apartment. They find mold in it. They rip our entire kitchen out. I find out I'm pregnant. I'm living in this mold. I end up having an HG pregnancy. If you know what that is, it's hyperemesis gravidarum. I'm throwing up 20 times a day. I lost 20 pounds during this pregnancy. I'm dehydrated. I have to go get IV fluids in. It was bad. I was in a rough state. This is the worst I was physically. I was basically completely bedbound. And I remember I would like wake up in this like horrible homeless lady robe and like be able to walk around like the little block that our apartment complex was on and go back into the bed. That was it. I feel so bad. My baby, thank God, my little daughter, she came out. She was born a month early because of health issues, for my health issues. She's perfect. So anyways, thank the Lord for that. But it was a bad time. So right before I found out I was pregnant, had at that point, you know, I actually I did forget to talk about this. I got distracted, but when I think I was talking about it when I went and worked for that startup after I left. Where did I leave? I left that gym, stopped seeing all the millions of doctors, went to work for the startup. So I'm going to bring this back in. I started to see like functional and alternative medicine doctors, and I spent all my money on that. And it was such a waste of time. Like, these people spoke a big game. I'd go and I'd like tell them every little thing like this. I'd talk to them like this, that, and say every little thing that was wrong with me. Didn't care. And they'd be like, cool, this is what we do. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to do the gut test and the stool test and give you some bullshit like, don't eat green beans, you have a high sensitivity to them, and take this rose hip supplement. And it was just nothing. It didn't help. And I thought you'd have SIBO or Hashimoto's and you don't. I don't know what's wrong with you. It was just thousands of dollars, and sometimes they wouldn't even give me the results, and it was terrible, which made me feel even more alone and more crazy. And I didn't have the energy to be managing that on top of trying to make any money to live. That was actually some of my lowest points, and that's why I just gave up. You know, by the time I'm talking to you about where I was working that little babysitting job, I'd given up on trying to like heal through anybody else. Like, that was gone. Like, I just decided I was going to live this tiny life, and nobody could help me, and I was just going to manage my symptoms the best I could. And I thought, well, you know, I even thought about like, okay, when I'm a mom, I guess I can just lay on the couch and like the kids will be okay. I've got 2 kids now. You're not sitting on any couches. You're just suffering if you're tired. But there are times that I definitely have not given my kids the energy I wish I could. But anyway, here we are, healing, feeling much better, and being a better mom. So just sometimes you just got to get there. My kids are only 3 and 1, so they got lots of more time with me. So there I was working that little babysitting job, found out I was pregnant, and right before I found out I was pregnant, I went back to a Western medicine doctor, and I had a really good one. She was kind of open to things, and she was basically, so if you're listening to this and you're listening to it for chronic fatigue syndrome, you probably know that it's a diagnosis of exclusion, basically meaning you have this list of symptoms, this syndrome, which I think, if I remember correctly, it's been some years since I really dived into it, but it is, you've had like an excessive amount of fatigue for 6 or more months. Okay, you've been basically exhausted, and you know what I'm talking about, because I'm a new mom, so I know what exhaustion is. This is different. This is like on a cellular level. You're dying. There's nothing. I mean, it feels like you're dying. Your brain doesn't even function. You're so tired. You just wish someone would literally put you to sleep. Exertional malaise, which means like any form of exertion, you just are like, you don't recover, or you just can't do it at all for some people, depending on how serious you are. Pain all over your body, hypersomnia or insomnia. I know there's more, but those are the main ones I can think of right now, and I had all of them. But then you need to go through the diagnosis of exclusion, meaning like, do you have cancer? Do you need iron? Do you have thyroid, etc., blah, blah, blah. And so I had done everything, and I didn't have anything that could come up on tests, which means you get kind of just stamped with that. You have CFS, which was so beautiful for me, actually, because I really just wasn't getting answers that made any sense. I had gotten a lot of diagnosis, as I mentioned. That was the only one that I ever connected with. And even though I don't always believe what maybe doctors believe about CFS, I know what I think it is. And like as far as the root causes and the actual way to recovery. Their ideas and are not concrete across all doctors, but in general, they're not exactly what I think is going on. But I do think people that are suffering with it and talking about it online, we do understand what's going on. A lot of nervous system dysregulation, a lot of brain retraining stuff, and that's all basically what I'm talking about. I think a lot of that's still missing the point, and that you should go read Nicole Sachs stuff if you want to get the point. But anyway, it's getting really hot in my car. I think I need to turn it on. Put on my air conditioning. I was trying not to do that so you guys didn't have to hear it, but it's too hot to be in here. Well, that's much better. Lovely. Yeah, what was I saying? Anyway, so then I went and I got diagnosed with CFS like a few weeks before I found out I was pregnant. So I quit the job because I was like, I'm gonna do this. So I found like a brain retraining course. I think I did. It's like Dan.
Like everything.
Oh no, girl.
Was